What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. Got a slightly different video this time. Just to get this out of the way, nothing I say in this video is actually going to get added to Smite or anything like that. This is just predictions and theories on what could potentially happen if the closed beta buffs and buff mechanics were added back into the game in Season 5. So take this video with a grain of salt, but with that being said, let's get started. So I think the biggest game changer if this were to actually happen would be the ability to stack multiple buffs onto one player. This is how it works in some other MOBAs and also how it worked in closed beta Smite. To clarify, you couldn't stack like 2 blue buffs on top of each other and get double regen and 20% CDR. It just enabled stacking multiple different buffs, but not 2 of the same. It just refreshed the duration like it does now. So probably the biggest implication of this will be for junglers. There will probably be a huge divide between junglers and laners on who gets what buffs until like a meta stabilised in terms of what buffs people get. Like, do you give red to the jungler in this situation to make his ganks better, or does mid still take it? Does ADC take both red and purple to try and snowball their lane? It'd probably get really confusing if the jungler like took a buff that the laner normally gets, for example. However, an all-powerful jungler carrying speed, red, blue and purple all at the same time could be pretty fun to watch. Also, it's only a small change, but as you can see here, the red buff used to be central within the map, with each team's red being on either side of the mid lane where mid harpies are now. While they ask you towards one team or the other with the terrain, they'll be very easy to like steal over a wall or just invade in general. And personally, I really like these like skirmishes that develop over invades and contesting neutral camps. So honestly, I would like to see how a neutral buff camp would work out in today's Smite. What do you guys think? Another major change to buffs from back in the day will be the reintroduction of the health and armor buffs. These 2 buffs were removed in closed beta and were located here and here on the old Conquest map. Which, by the way, was the one that had side jungles as well to accommodate these extra buffs in space. The armor buff was probably the most broken of the 2, but both were extremely powerful. The armor buff gave a flat 50 of both protections, regardless of your level or your character. So even at levels 1 through 5, you can take this buff and basically be invincible, since no one has penetration online at that point and you're sitting on like 80 protections with this buff. I think giving literally anyone on the team this buff would be extremely broken, but I think it will be most effective on solo laners, since if you give this to your solo and the enemy solo doesn't have it, it's basically just a free lane. You could then also, as I mentioned before, stack a blue buff on top of that with the new buff mechanics if you wanted for the sustain. And honestly, I think this armor buff would just completely destroy the game if it was re-implemented today. I think you put it on any character and they're just fucking invincible, so. But the health buff gave the user 10 HP regen per second, equivalent to 50 HP 5 in today's standards. This was also broken as fuck, but not quite as bad as the armor buff. But still, getting this early allowed you to out-sustain basically anyone who didn't have the buff. You wouldn't even need potions if you had this. It's basically like having a constant HP potion active for 120 seconds. Especially combining this health buff with the armor buff from before using the buff stacking system broke the game completely. And Odin back then with these 2 buffs was literally immortal unless he died to tower or got 5-manned. It was kinda ridiculous. Oh, and also, the cooldown buff was another buff that was changed from closed beta. As you might have guessed, this buff simply gave 15% cooldown reduction to the wielder. It was removed and merged with the blue mana buff to make the current blue buff we know today that gives both regen and CDR. So yeah, just think about any jungler carrying health, armor and speed buffs all at the same time and running at you. You can't kill them because of the health and armor buffs. You can't run away from them because they have speed buff. They just fuck you up and move on. Add a red buff in there as well and oh boy, you've got one OP jungler. Granted, other lanes would lose out if you go for a selfish jungler strat like this where you just give the jungler every single buff. But it could be funny to see someone walking around carrying 4 different buffs and one-shotting everyone. But yeah, high-res, please don't change buffs to work like they did in the past. Perhaps a toned-down version of the health or armor buffs could work, but I think buff stacking would cause way too many problems and confusion to really work well. Maybe in an adventure or a match of the day or something you could do a bit with that, but I think for normal games it would just ruin it. That's just my thoughts though. Let me know what you think the game will be like with these old buff mechanics added in and whether you think high-res should bring them back. Leave a like if you enjoy these discussion/speculation style videos, and I'll be sure to make a few more in the future. And I'll catch you guys later. Peace out, nerds.